It was so innovative and just so exciting to watch. The music and the storylines and everything were just very, very new and unusual. And we were like a repertory company. All the characters, Bob and myself and Maria, and we were like a repertory of actors that became a family.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, through the years, we were like an actual family, and so you didn't want to leave the family, and also being professional actors, we got to do other stuff also.
Sure.
Because we would go into the studio for about 6 months out of the year and tape all of the, I think it was 130 hours, 131-hour shows, material for enough of that. And we would finish it in about 6 months. And then for the other 6 months, we could go anywhere we wanted to go, do whatever we wanted to do. And because I was originally from the West Coast, I would finish in New York after 6 months, and then I'd go to Los Angeles and work there. So I did a lot of shows in L.A.
You did Lou Grant?
Yeah, Lou Grant was one of the shows.
Falcon Crest?
Falcon Crest. Wow, yeah, you're going back.
What were some of the reactions you'd get from people, when you'd go do other work and they'd say, "Oh my God, my kid watches you on TV"?
Yeah, well, I think probably the recognition was mainly from Sesame Street, because that was the most immediate one, and it was more pervasive than anything. I mean, Sesame Street was like they were showing it 3-4 times a day everywhere. And I mean, when I mean everywhere, I mean everywhere, in Australia and England and Ireland, you name it, everywhere. In those days, the English-speaking countries, but now I think it shows in something like 135 different countries, and a lot of those countries have their own versions of it in their own languages, of course.
Let's see if does anybody have any questions? All right, if you think of one, put your hand up.
Yeah, hi.
So go to the microphone so they can capture it.
Oh, okay. What's your name?
Jonathan.
Jonathan, all right.
My question to you is, why in one of the later seasons of the show was the Fix-It shop converted to a Mail-It shop?
That's a good question. Yeah. I really don't know the answer to that, other than to say that there was a period of time on the show where I don't know if it was the producers or I don't know who it was, decided that they needed to sort of like jive it up a little bit, and do something new. And they changed it, and I always thought, why did they change it, man? It was like one of the neighborhood things, You go to any neighborhood well, you used to. Now it's not so much now, but in those years, you go to any neighborhood in Manhattan or Queens or Brooklyn, and there was always a place where you could go take your toaster to get it fixed, or your ironing or whatever, your oven or whatever. But I guess I figure that they thought that the age of obsolescence took over, and now you didn't have to go get it fixed, and you just bought a new one.
Sure.
That's what I'm figuring that happened, So it was just a matter of just course of events that happened in the show. The show did change over the years, as a lot of you know, to where now it's showing, and it's considerably different from when you guys were watching it. But I mean, it's still a viable show. It engages a lot of children and families, But it is, I miss kind of like the old days, the old Fix-It shop when Harry Monster used to walk in, and he walked in one time. Luis was in the Fix-It shop, and Harry walked in and left the door open, and I said, "Harry, could you get the door?" And Harry walks over and rips the door off and brings it to me. Okay, Harry. I don't know if you remember Harry Monster. He didn't know his own strength. But I miss the old show.
Any other questions? Let me ask you about Northern Calloway, who played David. What do you remember about working with him?
Oh, Northern. There was such an incredibly talented human being. I mean, the guy could do anything. He could act, he could sing, he could dance. He wrote music, he produced records. I mean, the guy was all over the place. Really incredibly talented human being, and we worked very well together. On the road, we did very well. And he was always very engaging with people. And that was in the early years. But then what happened is he, I guess the bipolar thing got him. And it started to really deteriorate, to where in later years, because of medication and everything, it kind of, it sort of stopped him a bit,
Right.
And then he sort of slowed down.
What about Will Lee? Working with him, and of
Yeah.
course the very famous scene where Big Bird is told that Mr. Hooper passed away.
The famous scene, yeah. Will Lee was an incredible actor. I mean, all of us on the show respected him so much because, of course, he was the elder, and he had all of the experience as an actor that we all admired. He was one of the very few people in Hollywood at that time that actually confronted the HUAC hearings,
wow.
the House Un-American Activities
So
Committee.
he was blacklisted, or
So, yeah, and because he wouldn't talk, he was blacklisted in Hollywood, So that was unfortunate. But he came back years later. He came back when it was all over, all that stuff was over. I don't know if it's still over, but anyway, he came back and continued his career. And fortunately, we got him in his old age, and there he was, sweet Mr. Hooper.
yeah, as a character that always seemed a little grouchy and incredibly sweet.
I know, he was that way, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what about that scene where everybody tells Big Bird?
Oh yeah, so
That
then
must have been
what
heartbreaking
happened, that
to
was
film.
like that was one of the highlights of Sesame Street that the producers of the show actually had the courage to present something the theme of death.
Right.
I mean, come on, in a children's show, right? I mean, it had never been done before. I mean, it was kind of like a touchy subject for people. But they figured, wait a minute, we are so influential with children and their lives, and death in the family is a big part of a lot of children's lives. So I think the story needs to be told. And unfortunately, Will Lee, Mr. Hooper, died. And there was not going to be a replacement of the character, so they actually made it a point of writing a script to present to the children that Mr. Hooper died, and when somebody dies, he doesn't come back. That's just the way it is. And of course, Big Bird, being the representational child on the show, he's the one that was instructed with all of this. And it was very emotional. It was really a very emotional show for all of us because it was so real, and we all loved Will Lee.
It is hard to watch that. I've seen it a bunch of times, and it's hard to watch it without crying, even knowing what you're seeing and knowing it was years ago.
Yeah.
I had heard that that you guys had done the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and then he died shortly after that. And it was, do you remember doing the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade? Not just that year, but many years.
No, we did the parade for so many years, and it was an amazing thing because you're walking, you're going down the street, and there's literally like a couple of million people on either side of you that are like, that recognize you, and the characters and the families are saying hi and yelling and everything, and it was like instant recognition of these characters, Well, for us, of course, it was like very endearing, and it filled us with emotion, and that's why when Mr. Hooper was not there, it was very sad. It was very sad. The last time I saw him was very, very strange because I had been in Los Angeles, and I had just gotten back to New York, and I was on the bus going up Broadway, and I got on the bus, and I was standing because it was full, and I didn't realize until a few minutes after I had gotten on the bus, I was standing holding on to the strap, and right in front of me, sitting, was Will Lee. it was like, I didn't realize it was him, and he was just sitting there with this impish smile on his face, you know. He didn't say anything. He was just waiting for me to see him, I guess, you know. And I said, Will. And he said, hi, how you doing? And I very briefly, I talked with him, and then he had to get off, and he got off. And then I thought about it later, and I thought, now, that was really a strange thing, because it's almost as if he had just kind of like appeared out of nowhere. Whoop, there's a popper. Appeared out of nowhere, and then he was there.
Yeah.
And then it was a couple of days after that he died. Wow. And I thought, yeah, I don't know. Did he just come to say goodbye? I don't know.
And his health turned around that quickly.
Yeah. Well, apparently he had been suffering with something, and I think eventually his kidneys gave out. And that's what happened.
Jim Henson. Do you have any strong memories of working with him?
Oh yeah, totally. Now Jim was a spectacular human being. I mean, this guy was he was such a genius, you know. I mean, you always knew that he had 10 different things going on in his head, what he was going to be doing next, you know, whether it was a movie or a television show or a song or something. There was always something working in there. But when he was working and when we were working with him, of course, he was always right there. I mean, he knew exactly what he was doing and what we wanted to accomplish. He was just a very spectacular. He was. I always think of him as sort of a magician. You know, he could just conjure up stuff. You know, so many different kinds of things that he brought to life.
A lot of people, you know, always credit the show to him, but of course it was Joan Gans Cooney and Lloyd Morissette. What were your relationships with and still relationships with them?
Well, of course, Joan has always been the mother hen of the show. She's the one that was one of the main creators of the show. And she still is to this day the figurehead for the show, even though she relinquished her immediate participation with everything some years ago. But still, she's the figurehead, you know. And Lloyd Morissette, you know, and I read about them and how they started the show, and a very organic kind of, you know, process where they had this idea and they just worked it, and it was very complicated because they had to deal with a lot of different kinds of people, educators and psychologists, and, you know, people that were in the know about children and their lives. And they put it together. They put this idea together, and they didn't know if it was going to work. It was an experiment, you know. But the experiment worked. I mean, it went on and on and on. And it was funny because, I mean, after 15, 20 years, we'd still be stumbling around trying to figure something else. But eventually, because we had so many talented people of directors, producers, writers, the actors, everybody, I mean, we all worked together with these things, and we worked it, and it worked. Yeah.
Sesame Street has had a few movies, Elmo and Grouchland, and Follow That Bird.
Yeah.
What are your memories of that?
Of course, you know, our participation as a cast, or my participation as part of the cast, was with Follow That Bird. And we had a grand time doing that. Some of us were sort of like in the flashback scenes where they would flash back to Sesame Street, and everybody would be wondering where Big Bird was, you know, and how he was doing. If they were going to find him, then nobody knew where he was. And part of the cast was on the road looking for him. So we shot the film in Toronto, Canada, I think it was the summer of '84, I think it was,
right, yeah.
Something like that. And yeah, we were there for a few weeks, and we had a grand time doing that. Great memories of it.
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Come on up.
Yes. Around 1985 or so, you did a series of episodes where I think you had a cast on your right arm.
Oh, yeah.
And Big Bird was trying to help you out. He put padding all over the fix-it shop because he was afraid you'd hurt yourself again.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
of the things. And I really liked the song that you sang to him at the end after you got the cast removed, thanking him for all his help. I think Sully played the piano.
Oh, yeah.
I never heard that song again, but I'm curious, Was the injury real, or was there another reason it came about that you would go wear the
No,
costume
no,
to the show?
the injury was not real.
Okay.
Thankfully, in my whole life, I've never broken a bone. And that's remarkable considering what I've been through. Working in Hollywood with, doing all the Indian movies on horseback
Yes.
and everything, and I could tell you stories. But no, that was a prop, my broken arm. And I just remember, there were a couple of songs that came out of that. And that thank you song at the end, which I don't quite remember exactly how it went. But I do remember there was another song called My Broken Arm Blues. Remember that one? And that was, I had a lot of fun doing that song too. And again, these songs, at that time, 1985, Joe Raposo was still with us. And he was the music man. He was the guy that at that time was coming up with a lot of the music for the show. Fantastic songs and music that we were doing, that he was coming up for us. And Jeff Moss was another one of the composers for the show that came up with incredible music. So we were very lucky to have those two people who were the music men, you know. And you would tell these people, the writers would be writing a script, and there would be a bit about, Luis has a broken arm here. We need a song here. And Joe would go off into the room, and plunk out this song and come back half an hour later and there'd be a song right then and there, man. It was like Tin Pan Alley, It was amazing working with these people, so talented, Unfortunately, Joe died very early. I don't even think was 50 years old when he died. And Jeff Moss went also, may they rest in peace, both of them. Very talented.
You mentioned Westerns. I saw a film you did called I Will Fight No More Forever with an incredible TV movie cast. It's Sam Elliott, I think James Whitmore.
Yeah, James Whitmore, Sam Elliott.
What do you remember about that and movies like that where you're playing a different ethnicity and you're in full costume?
Yeah. Well, of course, it was very exciting because we did that on location. We shot it in Mexico. Way down in Mexico, up in the mountains. They have some beautiful mountains down in Mexico, outside of Cuernavaca. And we were there doing that location for a couple of months. So in addition to being a character for the movie, of course, we had a lot of fun in Mexico when we weren't working on the movie, right? That was a lot of fun going down there.
I feel like there's a story you're not telling us.
No, it was just a lot of fun with all these people, when you get actors together and we're on location, I mean, we go nuts sometimes, But Sam Elliott, terrific guy, James Whitmore, the same thing. I had met my second wife I met on that shoot. Nobody knows that, but I did, yeah. And when you say a different ethnicity, not quite, because I'm very much part American Indian.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. On my grandmother's side, Tarahumara from Chihuahua. So, so I kind of go that way, too.
Wow, that's fantastic. You did some episodes of House of Cards recently?
Oh, yeah, I did one episode. I think it was 2 years ago. I got the chance to go down to Baltimore and work with them. And I was the Mexican ambassador, of course. I thought it was interesting because when I went to the audition, the script said Brazilian ambassador, right? And I showed up and they saw my Mexican face, and when they hired me, they changed it to Mexican ambassador.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Do you have any famous guest stars that were some of your favorites?
Oh, yeah. Of course, one of my favorites, which all through my musical career, I always admired Harry Belafonte.
Oh,
I mean, to me, Harry was like one of the greats. Well, he still is, but I'm saying during those years when I was going to his concerts and everything, I was such an admirer of Harry with his talent. Amazing stuff. And of course, when I was in my 20s was the big folk song era, and that's when Harry was really big, And of course, that's during the time when I was doing a lot of folk stuff too. So yeah, I was a great admirer of Harry, and I was so amazed when he was on the show. And another one was Tony Bennett.
Oh, wow.
And Tony, to me, is an amazing singer. I mean, he's possibly the greatest jazz singer alive right now.
Working with Sonia Manzano,
Yeah,
who plays Maria up until, I guess, last year.
Yeah.
You, I assume, had a very close working relationship with her. What are some of your memories of working with her back then?
Oh yeah, well, you know, Sonia and I, of course, because we were both Latinos. I mean, it was like immediate, you know, friendship. You know, we were like just be talking back and forth in Espanol, you know, and saying all these things and discovering each other's culture. Because, of course, being Chicano from the West Coast, I had no idea what Puerto Ricans were like. You know, I just knew that there were Latinos out there. But there was like thousands of miles away. It was another world, you know. And I'm sure that a lot of Puerto Ricans thought the same thing about Chicanos in the West Coast. And the two had never really met, you know, because it was like opposing coasts, you know, or opposing worlds. But now, of course, everything is totally different. Everybody knows who everybody else is, you know, and especially living in New York, there's Mexicans, Cubanos, Puerto Ricanos. There's a little bit of everything in New York City, and we all kind of like just merged together there, you know. So during those whole years of knowing Sonia, of course, we became excellent friends, and we still are to this day. And growing up actually with her, and then she having her child in actual life, you know, and I've sort of been in her child's life as well, Gabriela, and a lovely, beautiful child that she had.
What about Carol Spinney? Carol Spinney has done the convention here before, and Oscar and Big Bird interacted the most with the humans on the street. What was your experiences working with him?
I love Oscar. I love Oscar, and I love Big Bird too. I mean, and the whole thing, of course, being that Carol Spinney is the guy that does both of them, you know. Right. And to me, he's one of the most lovable people in the world. He would never admit that. But I think that he is. I mean, and it's manifested, his personality, his loving personality is manifested with the woman that he married, Debbie. I don't know if any of you know her, but she is the sweetest human being in the world. And they both deserve each other 100%, you know, because of that.
They have one heck of a happy story. That documentary, I Am Big Bird, covers that very well.
If you haven't seen that, you should see it, because you learn a lot about Carol Spinney and his, not only his life, but how he came about to be Big Bird and all those things.
One of the things they talk about in the documentary that I wanted to ask you about is some of the appearances you guys did, where you would go on stage in front of kids at different places.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we did a lot of live shows over the years. This is mostly in the 80s and 90s. And Sonia Manzano and I, as Luis and Maria, traveled all over the country doing our live musical show. And we did all of the venues, you know, all those big theaters, small theaters. We did malls. We did everything, you know, where people congregated with as families with their kids and everything. And it was an amazing part of the story, because we would go out and actually be right there with the fans, you know, right there with them, and we could feel their love right instantaneously, you know. It was an amazing time.
Did you ever do any performances at Sesame Place, the Sesame Street theme park in Pennsylvania?
I think one time, many, many years ago, Sonia and I did our show there.
Okay.
And it was just that one time, though.
Yeah, I know she's appeared there. I know that Bob has sung there many times.
Who's here now, as you know.
And Bob will be here with you on Monday, on July 4th at 12:45. I think this same room or the one over there for a Q&A together.
Yeah, good.
What's it like to work with Bob now that he's not here to hear it?
Hey, yes, sirree, Bob, man. I'm telling you, he's the greatest guy in the world. He really is, and I admire him greatly. I mean, this guy has been singing since he was 5 years old. You know, well, not professionally, but most of his life.
He was a teen heartthrob.
Yeah, he was a a singer.
In Japan.
And he was a big star in Japan where he was singing in Japanese and everything. I mean, he sold millions of albums out there, you know. This is all before Sesame Street, of course, you know. And I just admire him greatly because he's such a great artist himself in his own right.
Let's go back to when you first were hired for Sesame Street. How did that go? Did you audition? Was it a character that existed, or were they looking for a personality to...
You know, I don't know if the actual character of Luis actually existed at the time, but I do know that because there was a big clamor at that time from Latinos everywhere to be included into Sesame Street, you know, because we figured, yeah, we're part of the population. There's a lot of Latino kids out there, and they want to learn all this stuff too. And so there was a lot of clamor, you know, in trying to convince the Sesame Street people that we should be included. You know, Puerto Ricans, Cubanos, Chicanos out west. So I think it came out of that where they decided that they were going to do that. And they started looking for people in New York, and that's when they found Sonia, you know, Sonia Manzano. And I'm glad that they thought about going out west, because at that time there weren't a lot of Chicanos out in the east in New York.
Sure.
I think when I first arrived in New York in 1971, there was only one Mexican restaurant in Manhattan. Can you imagine? And it was called Pancho Villa. So that was the only place I could go to eat Mexican food. Here was this Mexican looking for Mexican food in New York. And the only other place where I could buy product was on 14th Street. There was a little tiendita, a little store that sold tortillas in a can. So, but anyway, what happened? I got off.
That's good.
Well, what happened is that one of the executive producers went out to Los Angeles because he figured, okay, there's a lot of Mexican American actors out there. We should be able to find somebody. And I don't know how many people they auditioned or saw, but I was one of them. And I went to and it wasn't even an audition, it was more of an interview kind of thing, where I went to this office that the executive producer apparently had rented, for the occasion. And, it was my turn. I went in, and he just asked me some questions, whether I spoke Spanish. I said, yes, of course, He asked me if I was Mexican-American, and I said, yes, of course. And can you sing? Yeah, I can sing. Can you dance? Yeah, I can dance. I mean, I'm an actor. This is all the stuff that I studied how to do, And it was very real. It was no audition or anything like that. And thank you very much. I left. A month went by, I didn't hear anything. So as an actor, I just thought, okay, just kiss it off. It was just another audition. Right. But that same summer, maybe 2 months later, I got another call and said, Mr. John Stone, our executive producer, writer, director, whatever, is going to be in Los Angeles and wants to speak to you about being on our show. And I said, sure. So John Stone, who was one of the major people on the show, went out to Los Angeles and I interviewed with him. Again, it was not even an audition, it was just an interview, And I think they had probably seen some stuff that I had done in Los Angeles already on television. And, but he asked me, he says, okay, he says, if you want to work for us, be in New York, October 11th. This was 1971. And this was like around September of 71. And he says, be in New York, October 11th, we'll send you a ticket. And I said, great, got a job. I got a job, That's the way I got the job,
Yeah.
So, and then 2 weeks later, I was in New York, set foot in New York for the first time.
How long did you think the job would last?
I mean, as an actor, you think, okay, maybe a couple of years, That would be good. A couple of years working full-time, all the time. Steady gig. And it went on. 5 years, 10, 15, 20, and on and on.
When you started, the show was relatively new. It was a couple of years old. Was it something you were very familiar with already?
No. As a matter of fact, I had no idea what Sesame Street was. And at the time, I had a child who was a year and a half old, right? But I never really watched television that much. I was not a TV watcher.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'd turn it on and watch some show or whatever. But I wasn't a regular show, a TV viewer. But so when I got that the job, I really didn't know. I knew it was a children's show and that it was on television, and it had been on. Excuse me. It had been on a couple of years, but other than that, I just said okay. But of course, for me, the big change was that for the first time in my life, I was going to go to New York, 3,000 miles away. And when I arrived in New York, it was quite a cultural shock for me. It was a cultural shock. Even though I had grown up in an urban environment, both in Mexico and in California, New York was like overwhelming. It was overwhelming. After a couple of years, I actually went back to California, and then for 15 years, I went back and forth between New York and California.
Any other questions? Yes. Come on up to the mic just so they can get it on the camera.
I know you mentioned the skit with Harry. Was there a particular Muppet or your favorite Muppet that you enjoyed working with that you just had your favorite?
Yeah, I've always loved Big Bird and Oscar. Those are the two. And I think it's because, to me, of course, Big Bird is the representation of the child. You know, he's that 5-year-old. Originally, it was the 5-year-old that everybody was trying to reach, the 5-year-old. Now, I think now the show kind of like took it down to maybe 2 or 3 years old. But at that time, it was a 5-year-old kid. And Carol just was that 5-year-old when he was in that costume. You know? And that's, I think, why I loved him. And Oscar, because he was such a grouch.
It's also so great to have one guy doing those two totally different characters.
And, you know, and the thing about Carol Spinney is that he's such a talented guy that, I mean, you don't realize this guy is an amazing artist. You know, he does these amazing art things, you know. And he's also a spectacular skater.
Wow.
Did you ever see that I don't know if you remember, there was one character where he was the garbage man.
Oh, sure.
You remember the garbage man?
Bruno, I think.
Bruno, yeah, Bruno. And Bruno was always on roller skates, right?
Wow.
And so Carol Spinney was Bruno in that costume with roller skates, and he was carrying around a trash can, right? And with his other hand, he did Oscar at the same time. I mean, he was doing like 2 different characters and skating at the same time. I don't know how the heck he did that, but he did it. It's amazing when you watch it, you think, wow, how many people are in there? You know?
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Please come on up.
First of all, I want to say it's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
I came to the United States in 1971, actually December 1971,
Wow.
and I learned to speak English watching Sesame Street. Did you ever imagine Sesame Street was going to have such an impact on children all over?
No, not at all. I mean, me as myself, no. The people that came up with the show, I'm sure had an idea that it was going to be effective in some way. Because if they figured, you know, kids were watching TV anyway, right? But they were watching commercials and they were watching, you know, this other content that was not really appropriate for children. But to take the venue of television and to turn it into an educational venue was experimental. Nobody had ever done that before, you know.
How did your son enjoy watching you on TV?
Of course. You know, he grew up watching the show from just a very little kid. After I got the job, you know. So he was very proud, of course, of his dad being on the show and everything. And he was just another fan. He loved the show, you know. And then later I had a daughter, and she grew up with it also, you know. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think it's great when I hear these stories, because over the years I've heard so many people say the same thing, that they learned English from watching the show. And not only people from, you know, the Latinos from Puerto Rico or Colombia or Mexico, but also people from Egypt, you know, and in Malaysia, in China. I mean, all these people learned the language from watching Sesame Street. To me, it's an amazing story, you know. Yeah. Yeah, and to me, the amazing thing about that is that what it did for children that were watching the show is that it was totally expanding their minds. You know, that there was somebody else that was speaking in a different language. There were still human beings, but they spoke differently. I mean, they did the same things, only they spoke differently. You know, so it sort of expanded a child's mind to me.
Any final questions? Yes.
Yes.
Please come on up.
I actually have a couple. I'm wondering, you were telling us about what it was like to have those songs churned out for you in half an hour. What was it like then to be handed this and told, okay, now do this?
Yeah, I know.
And so what was that like for you as a performer? And then my second question is, do you have a favorite piece of music from the show? And putting you on the spot, do you want to give us a couple of bars so we'll get all weepy?
Yeah. Well, of course, one of my favorite songs on the show was written up by Joe Raposo, and you know, he, like I say, he wrote all his music from the heart, you know, from the heart, and the song that really everybody everybody really appreciates is a song that everybody knows, you know, the alphabet song. No, I was just saying. It was, how would I start it? Let's see, find a key here. I'm going to get emotional here because Joe wrote this song, and he's such a, I'm forgetting the bars. I'm forgetting the tune. I'm blanking. Okay, I'm sorry.
This is the song "Sing" you're talking about.
Yeah. And,
sing a song.
Yeah, right. That one. But I was going to start it with. Okay, well, I'll just start it like regular. And the meaning of this song, to me, is because when a child hears this song, it's like telling them that it doesn't make any difference, you know, where you come from or what you look like or anything. You just sing your song.
Yeah.
You know, just sing your song.
Don't worry if you're not good enough.
Sing a song. Sing out loud. Sing out strong. Sing of good things, not bad. Sing of happy, not sad. Joe Raposo.
All right. Emilio Delgado, he'll be signing in
Thank
booth
you.
330, and he'll be back in this room on Monday at 12:45.
It's great to see you. Thank you very much, everybody.